This main valve controls the heat for all of Tier 7.
Great. I'll just turn this sucker off. Oh yeah, no, I knew that.
It's alright. There's so much new information for you to assimilate. Sometimes the smaller things will elude you.
Well, at least you get that. The others treat me like I'm some kind of Earth idiot.
Well, granted, they're not the most patient beings, but what did you expect?
I don't know, a little slack maybe? At least they know where they are, how things work. It takes me 10 minutes to figure out how to open the door.
You'll need to develop some patience yourself if you expect to survive here.
I'm trying. I am trying. But with Aaron and Dargo, it's like everything is a test. It's like I'm in some never-ending frat hazing at Alien U.
Frat? Hazing?
Next planet, I'll rent you a copy of Animal House.
Welcome to the Uncharted territories. I'm Max.
And I'm Tina.
And we're here to talk about Farscape.
Yeah, okay. This is one of those things, it totally did not occur to me until you pointed it out, but director Brian Henson sure does love featuring Ben Browder's ass in this episode.
Yeah, this episode's a good 40% ass.
There's a lot of ass in this episode.
It's like a Quentin Tarantino movie where you don't notice the foot thing until someone points it out and then you can't stop seeing it.
Yeah. This is the third episode of Farscape as far as airing order goes, Exodus from Genesis. And this episode was directed by none other than Brian Henson.
Son of Jim Henson?
Son of Jim Henson, and also director of Muppet Christmas Carol.
Ooh.
And Muppet Treasure Island. And that adult Muppet movie that was on the shelf until last year.
Oh, the Happy Time Murders or Smile Time Murders or...
Yeah, that one.
Well, every 10 years or so, someone's like, hey, it's a good idea. We should have an adult-oriented puppet thing.
Okay, so as a teenager, I was obsessed with Meet the Feebles, but I'm kind of afraid to rewatch it because I think I might just be like, oh no.
Okay, so Meet the Feebles was the 80s.
Uh-huh.
Greg the Bunny was the 90s.
Avenue Q was the 2000s, even though that was a musical, not a TV show or movie.
Yeah, which I love Avenue Q, but parts of it have aged very poorly. And was there anything between Avenue Q and the Happy Town Murders?
I don't think so.
Which, I love Melissa McCarthy, but some of the movies she chooses to be in are just...
Well, remember, that one sat on the shelf for a while, so I don't know how much pull she had when she was in that. I mean, neither of us saw it, so, maybe it was secretly brilliant.
Yeah, it could be one of those movies where people revisit it 5 years from now and are like, oh, I don't know why everyone was so down on this. Like, how the prequels went through that weird cyclical thing where everyone loved them when they first came out, and then everyone was like, no, wait, these might not be good, and then it was, oh no, these are the worst things ever. And
I think this is our age difference, because no one I know loved them when they first came out.
Yeah.
But we kept seeing them all.
Yeah.
We were like, no, the next one will be better.
Well, people have been less cruel to them recently, although that might just be because of the horrible things that the guy who played Jar Jar Binks and baby Anakin went through.
Yeah, there was no reason to be mean to the individual people other than George Lucas, who... Look, his crime is that he is not good at story structure. He only creates movies because he likes the editing process, which is fine. But, don't let him write them.
Well, I think it's been said before, everything that you like about the original Star Wars movies is, was done by either his wife or the actors.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Now, speaking of writers, this episode was written by Ro Hume. And I just want to bring this up because it's kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
She's the only credited writer on this episode.
Another female writer.
Yeah, uh-huh. And apparently, according to Rockne O'Bannon and David Kemper, who are the creator and producer of this show, they weren't happy with her script and did massive rewrites on it. But I don't know how much of that is true and how much of that is them, because she, as I said, is the only credited writer. And interestingly, I don't know what this means, but she never wrote another episode of Farscape. She's credited as a story by on another episode, and she's credited as executive consultant on several of the best episodes, especially in the early seasons. So PK Tech Girl, DNA Mad Scientist, Rhapsody in Blue. Rhapsody in Blue is also the one where she has a story credit. So... I don't know what her deal is. I just find this very interesting that apparently they didn't like her as a writer, but she has at least fingerprints in some of the best episodes. And as I said, is the only credited writer on this episode. And the Writers Guild is very precise about who is credited on episodes.
I was about to say, I feel like it's weird that the Writers Guild didn't have more to say about her being the only credited writer if there were massive rewrites on this episode.
Yeah.
Although
maybe it's different in Australia? I don't know.
Although there's a creator I really like, God, I might be saying her name wrong, Hannah Blumenrich. If you've seen those really fun Spider-Man in high school fan comics that have been going around the internet for a while, that's her.
Oh yeah, love those.
Yeah, she recently did some writing on a Big Hero 6 comic, and by recently I mean she did it like almost a year ago or over a year ago, and it just came out now. And she was really mad that they have her name like big and up, and they changed huge parts of her script.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, comics writers don't have the same kind of union, or any union, as TV and film writers. So, I mean, they could just, depending on what her contract says, they could rewrite everything and keep her name on it.
Which is one of the reasons I'm trying to be, on Twitter and stuff, less hard on writers who do stories I'm not a huge fan of.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about comics. There's so much out, especially when you're not writing, you know, an independent creator-owned book. If you're writing as part of for one of the big two, you're basically under a lot of creative constraints.
Like, I feel like I've been on the record as not liking Secret Empire. I think it was bad from the get-go.
Ugh.
But the thing is, I've read a lot of Nick Spencer stuff in the past and liked it. And I'm like, this is the first big event he was on and not a weird side book. So I'm wondering if there was editorial stuff or...
Well, I mean, one of the biggest problems with Secret Empire isn't so much the storyline where they made Cap a Nazi, but everybody coming out and being like, oh no, this is 100% permanent. Like, this is our first comic rodeo.
Okay, yeah, that always honks me off. Like, I didn't have any issues with the Superior Spider-Man plotline, the one where Doc Ock switches bodies with Spider-Man and then kills Spider-Man in his body.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have any issues with that plot. It's the fact that that Dan Slott was on Twitter all the time, like, oh no, this is the new status quo, this is going to be forever. And the fact that afterwards people are like, oh, everyone was throwing temper tantrums because they thought it was the new forever thing. I'm like, no. We all know how comics work.
Why are you insulting our intelligence?
Well, we know that none of the new things are ever going to stick. We know that there are some inevitable baseline states for superheroes that they're always inevitably going to go back to. Like, I don't care that, you know, whatever big twisty thing you've come up with has happened. It just bugs me when you act like, okay, this is going to be forever.
Look, comic books as an industry can't aggressively, and by the way, again, I'm talking about the big two, not some of the cooler indie books, can't aggressively not court younger fans and then act like we don't know what's happening. Oh. Like, either recruit 8-year-olds to read comics again, or stop acting like we're not, you know, adults in our 30s and 40s who have been through this several million times already.
See, the thing is, that was a thing in the Silver Age where they talked about how there was a thing where you could feel free to repeat a plot as long as it was from, I think it was 4 years ago, because it was assumed that you would have a brand new audience and it wouldn't be the same kids reading who would get mad that you were just repeating plots.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, my intro to comics was Archie Comics. And Archie Comics is still for kids, and that's definitely something they do in Archie Comics. In fact, I think the time I decided that I was done reading Archie Comics as a child was the time that I picked up a double digest at the grocery store, and every single story was one I'd already read. And I was like, time to move on to Wonder Woman, I see.
I understand that experience.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Farscape.
Let's talk about Exodus from Genesis.
So we open with Fish King doing a painting.
Yeah, so Rigel is painting a self-portrait, and very bold. He appears to have no mirror or anything. He's painting a self-portrait from memory. I feel like that's hard. Also, he appears to have his snacks and his paints in the same bowl with each other.
Oh, God. Did he not see that one episode of Daria?
exactly what I was thinking of. The episode of Daria where Jane uses melted gummy bears for her art project and then Tom eats them and she gets mad at him for eating the gummy bears. Which, to be fair, you can't just assume that gummy bears sitting out are like...
on a bowl on the table.
Those... Alright, I guess they were fair game.
Although I can't imagine you seeing a thing of melted gummy bears and thinking, I'm just going to reach my hand and grab a...
No, she hadn't melted them yet. She'd only separated them by color.
Oh.
But you know what? They were separated by color.
Yeah, I would wait before going in there. I mean, I generally ask if it's okay before eating anything that is in someone else's house.
I was going to say that's because we were both raised very waspish, but you know who else was?
Tom.
Exactly.
I feel like Tom was a good high school boyfriend for Daria.
Yeah.
Not so much for Jane.
Well, I mean...
I think Nathan was a good high school boyfriend for Jane.
I think if MTV had had the courage of their convictions, they would have given Jane a good high school girlfriend, but that is a story for a different podcast. My dream podcast, Gal Pals, Lesbian Undertones in Pop Culture. So, after we see Rigel, not painting with gummy bears, but he is eating out of the same bowl that his paints are in.
Not a smart idea.
Maybe his paints are edible.
Point.
I mean, maybe for his race.
Yeah, he does fart helium after all.
Yes. And then speaking of weird alien things, we then see Dargo forcing a worm into John's mouth. A worm which they call the dentic. It is a parasite that you put in your mouth, and it runs along your teeth and eats all of the like food particles and bacteria in your mouth, and it's how they clean their teeth instead of brushing them.
And John almost swallows it. He grabs him by the throat and he's like, don't swallow it.
He says it really ominously too. He's like, never swallow the dentic. This never comes back again.
Do the dentics come back?
Not in the show. I have read at least one Farscape novel that uses the dentics, just as a throwaway joke.
I do enjoy, not throughout this episode, but in a fair amount of this episode, they do kind of treat John like he's a very smart beagle.
Oh, poor John. Well, and I mean, this is a reminder of how John is completely out of place in this world. You know, he doesn't even know how to brush his teeth.
Your asses would have been so fucking screwed if it wasn't for him.
Oh, man, yeah. Well,
Last episode even.
First episode. And honestly, this episode too. John is good at what he does. It's just that he doesn't know how to brush his teeth.
Yeah, like, seriously, Dargo, after freeing Moya by ripping out a bunch of wires in the first episode, what is one positive thing you've done on the show thus far?
I mean, John is right in the scene that we did as an intro. They all need to cut him some slack.
Yeah, like, he can't figure out how to do basic stuff on the ship, but he saved them so many times 3 episodes in.
Yeah. But this whole demonstration of how John doesn't know what world he's in is interrupted when the ship starts pitching all around and everybody runs to command to see what's going on. John does make a comment that the dentic tastes minty, which I think is to make it seem less gross to us.
That a giant larva was just crawling around his mouth?
Yup.
So, Pilot's like, hey, you know how every episode we've basically had something wrong with the ship? Well, something's wrong with the ship.
Well, it's not something wrong with the ship yet. They have encountered what appears to be an asteroid field, and Dargo's trying to get Aaron to maneuver around it, but Aaron lets him know that the asteroid field isn't the problem. The problem is that there is a marauder ship, a peacekeeper ship, on the other side of the debris, and they, just by the fucking luckiest luck that ever lucked, are on the other side of a debris field, so the ship can't scan for them. So, this is Crace hunting for John.
One would think that Crace would be in the earlier episodes more. Is this why they aired them out of order? Because I feel like, I mean, I know we're only 3 episodes in, but we haven't seen him since the pilot.
I mean, that makes sense. We don't see him at all in IET. So, yeah, I guess I would understand why you'd want to show more Crace before.
I mean, if he's going to be the main villain for the early bit of the show.
Which he definitely is. And we don't see Crace in this episode either, but I feel like that's okay because the Marauders are his advanced scouts, right? So they are the Crace in this episode. So the Marauders are basically like an elite strike force team. It's 5 peacekeepers who are like specially trained to go and kill people, because that's what they do.
So John's like, what are they flying? What are we dealing with? And Aaron's like, it's a bloopity bloop bloop. And he's like, why, that's like a space Hyundai. You could just blow it right out of the water.
Okay, so actually, she says that their maximum speed is Hech 7. And John's like, Hech 7? That's nothing! Which means that he has at least learned some stuff about space.
Yeah. Also, they're not going to know what a Hyundai is, John.
They're...
Also, what a weird slam.
Yeah, poor Hyundais. What did a Hyundai ever do to you?
I mean, to be fair, Hyundais suck.
Aw.
I don't know why I have strong feelings about this, but I drive a Honda. They're good cars.
I have no feelings about Hyundais. But Dargo points out that even if they outrun the Marauders, that means Krace will know where they are, and they cannot outrun Krace's command carrier, so they just have to hide. So hiding has temporarily helped.
Mm-hmm. The peacekeepers have missed them and are now flying in presumably the wrong direction.
And I love this because I think my favorite relationship on this show is the Pilot-Aaron relationship. And Pilot just takes a moment and says, "We work well together, Officer Soon."
Yeah, and they had a kind of neat connective moment last episode, so I do like that this is building on that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good idea to make friends with the thing you're currently living inside of.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. This moment of camaraderie is interrupted for us, the viewer, as we see that the thing that is not an asteroid field, but in fact a mass of tiny bugs, swarms inside of the ship.
Gross.
And then we cut to credits.
So, we're back in space. I guess we're perpetually in space.
Yes.
John is helping out the... DRDs, thank you. I never
Space
remember.
Roombas?
Space Roombas. I nearly called it an R2-D2.
A little bit. Everybody's basically cleaning up because things got all thrown askew when the ship was tilting hither and yon. And Aaron explains to John why the Marauders are so effective, and she draws out on the ground in some thing that has spilled on the ground. She draws out a cross-hatch pattern, like an asterisk, and it's like, the Marauders, they follow a strict hatch pattern, so nothing escapes them. And I'm like, Aaron, space is 3D. You have explained nothing about their pattern.
Yeah, it makes me think about that one scene in Futurama where Leela's trying to stop the Planet Express ship from going to that planet with the penguins, and they built a human wall, and Planet Express ship just goes up and over them, and she's like, oh right, space is 3-dimensional.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I think about that whenever there's a sci-fi show or movie, and it's like, space is in all directions.
I mean, essentially no sci-fi show acknowledges that space is in all directions. But Aaron gets kind of misty. I mean, not misty because she's Aaron. She would never get misty. But whatever the Aaron equivalent of misty is, she gets it talking about these Marauders because they're like the elite group that everyone wants to be. And she was waiting to hear on whether or not she would get a promotion to the Marauders. I'm sorry. She points out the ship is called a Marauder. The group are called Commandos. She was waiting to hear whether or not she'd be promoted to a commando when everything went down. And now she's, untouchable.
She wanted to go commando.
Yes.
Speaking of Ben Browder's ass.
Yes. Speaking of Ben Browder, John is all like, yeah, none of us are where we thought we were going to be, Aaron.
Yeah, get over yourself. Ooh, boo-hoo, I don't get to be a space fascist murdering people. Grow up.
Yeah. And then John's like, we should work together. And she's like, we're not friends, we're not family. And I just have to say again, I love about this show that just because a bunch of people are thrown into a situation together, the show doesn't make them immediately become best friends and trust each other. It makes them earn that over the course of the show.
Yeah, John's like, come on, shut up and be my friend. Get over your stupid fascist army and upbringing and all that jazz.
Well, because John was raised on that science fiction. So he's like, we're all thrown in a situation together. Aren't we all friends now? And Aaron's like, no, this is the real world.
John would be very into Steven Universe.
Yes.
Well, because they're both bards.
Yes.
Elsewhere, Zan is cleaning up the ship.
Yeah, she's helping out Rigel, whose painting got knocked down and paint got sprayed everywhere. And his painting got messed up because he was like, he had brush to painting when the ship started rocking, so now there's a giant red streak across it. And then, okay, I think this is really rude.
I also think it's rude, but I mean, it's better than what he was doing, but it's still rude.
Zan goes over and just completely paints over his painting.
Okay, I feel like they used speeded up footage for her powers last episode, and they're doing it again here.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. Like, you're saying that, like, you already did that, do something new. But in fact, what you're talking about is consistency.
Yes. But she soul painting him, which just comes out as a better painting of him. She's like, I was drawing your soul essence, and it's just a painting of him. It's not like I would think it would be more abstract if she was drawing a soul essence, but
that makes sense. Rigel says that the painting looks like Rigel the First, his most honored ancestor, and then she all flatters him and is like, yes, Rigel the First is clearly, you have a piece of his spirit in you.
It's not said, but I like to think that your number isn't based on chronology, but based on how successful you were as an emperor.
So Rigel the First was like the 10th Rigel. It's just he was the best Rigel. I love that idea, especially because we skipped past it. But Rigel tells Zan that he is the most attractive of all his brothers, and that's why his mother banished all of his older brothers so that he could be Dominar.
God. Oh my God, you know who he is? Emma Roberts' character in Scream Queens.
Oh, I never saw that.
We found out that she had a baby brother, but the parents gave him up for adoption because he had cradle cap and they thought it was gross.
Wow.
It took me way longer than it should have to realize that that show was a parody. Its tone was always too inconsistent for me to enjoy it.
Well, I mean,
you know how Glee...
That's the Ryan Murphy way, right?
Yeah, it's like how Glee started out as a parody of teen shows, except it wasn't full enough of a parody to stop it from just becoming a regular teen show over time.
Well, it's actually an amazing thing that the AV Club talked about a lot when were doing Glee recaps. How it's like there were 3 different shows, and you never knew from episode to episode which one you were going to get. Like, you didn't know if you were going to get a High School Musical, or an amazing biting satire of High School Musical, or a very special after-school special.
Yeah. I want to like Ryan Murphy's shows more than I do because I feel like there's never a consistent enough tone.
Yeah, well, when he was doing Popular way back in the day...
Oh, God, Popular.
That show should have been, like, right up my alley, but there was something... You know what? There was, like, a core of meanness to it that made me not able to like it all the way.
I mean, honestly, that's why I stopped watching Scream Queens. Like, it felt nasty in a way that wasn't fun.
Yeah, and I mean, I like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? Like, I'm not against meanness, but there was something about it was like the show itself hated itself. It hated its characters in like some fundamental way.
It hated the sort of people who would enjoy it.
Yes! Yes! Well, we've solved that. Let's go back to Farscape.
Yes. So John is being a sad boy.
Yeah, Aaron and John are still in the cargo bay working on stuff. And we see from the point of view of what we will know are the bugs. We see from the point of view of the bugs them crawling around and looking at things and shooting a little dart into Aaron's foot. And Aaron is getting increasingly grouchy, and I totally relate because it is very hot. And I cannot stand any, like, temperature fluctuations. I can't stand it if it's too cold. I can't stand it if it's too hot. And she's talking about how it's too hot, and John's like, I don't feel it. Fuck you, John, it's hot!
Yeah, you are different species.
I actually find this really funny because, yeah, they are different species. Later on, Dargo's going to be like, this is a mild winter on my planet.
Shut up, Dargo.
But somehow they've just decided what optimum is. Because I actually think this is really clever that they just talk about the temperature of the ship as, for instance, right now John goes and checks the thermostat, and it's optimum +3. So we, as the viewers, don't need to worry about what the temperature is. We don't, as Americans, have to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius, because that never makes sense to me. Like, you all should be I don't understand it. So I think the optimum +3, and later they're going to get, like, optimum +15. Like, that all makes sense to me. I like it. It's great.
You don't have to play that Buffy game that you play.
Oh my god, yeah. Look at like any scene that's outdoors with 3 or more characters and be like, what temperature is it based on what everyone is wearing?
It is a fun Buffy game to play.
But I do think that optimum, in quotation marks, is probably optimum for Sebastians.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because this ship was reconfigured to be a Sebastian ship, right?
I mean, it was taken by Sebastians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They messed with it. They put, like, crap in Moya's brain and all that jazz.
Yeah, so Dargo comes over the communicator and is like, yeah, there's something wrong. We're not venting heat. We have to figure out where the blockage is. And Aaron's like, well, then find the blockage.
I like how Erin, like, one of the bug things shoots a dart into her hand, and she's like, ow. And I'm like, you had way more of a reaction to that happening than to when Rigel took a bite out of your arm last episode.
Well, when Rigel took a bite out of her arm, that's so interesting. When Rigel took a bite out of her arm last episode, she was engaged in, to some extent, combat.
Do Sebastians have, like, biological things that kick in during combat?
No, but I mean, she's trained to shrug it off. Right now, she's engaging in, like, tech stuff, which we learn in PK Tech Girl, she finds beneath her. So getting she thinks it's a metal splinter, even though it's a dart from the bugs. So getting a metal splinter while she's fixing a technical problem is not something she's prepared to deal with. She's prepared to deal with fish guys taking gigantic bites out of her arm. I hadn't really put that together, but it totally tracks with this character and with what we know and will learn about her. We cut to command where Dargo is also pulling a dart out of his arm, so he has also just been darted. But we don't have time to deal with that because it's getting hot.
It is getting hot in here, so Ben Browder needs to start taking off clothes.
Actually, all of the characters start taking off clothes. Also, fun fact, Dargo is probably not wearing pants underneath that outfit because that actor's costumes were very hot, so he would famously only put on what was going to show.
Well, there's some interesting stuff with Ted Raimi being one of the Deadites in the Evil Dead movies, where there's a bit where he takes off a glove and just sweat pours out of it. Sorry, too gross?
No.
But I imagine that has to be the Dargo actor all the time.
Yeah, probably.
Although, not so much with Zan. I feel like Zan's wearing one of those outfits that's, like, very comfortable in a lot of different temperatures. Like, it's covering a lot, but it's also kind of light and airy.
Yeah. Also, as a plant-based life form, Zan is probably less bothered by temperature changes, unless they're very extreme.
Yeah.
So, they're going to search the ship, level by level, and try to find what it is that's blocking Moya from venting the excess heat out into space.
So this is another... X is wrong with the ship. We have to find something to fix X.
Well, I mean...
I'm sorry, but we're 3 for 3 at this point.
It's a space show.
Like, yeah, it's every episode of every space show. X is wrong with the ship. We have to find something to fix X.
Okay, look. You're in space. Space is not a friendly environment for humans. Apparently, some creatures can just live in space, but humans are not one of them. So any conflict... I mean, the main conflict is going to be this thing that you desperately need because you will die without it, and it's so finicky, needs you to do something. Think about what it would be like if every time something went wrong with your computer, you couldn't breathe.
No, I get it, but that changes later, right?
Yeah.
It's not every episode we're going to have to deal with something going wrong with Moya.
No.
I know it's not really super analogous, but I keep going back to, what if there was a show about Jonah and the whale, and every episode something was wrong with the whale and Jonah had to fix it?
That's not what's happening. And also, yes, the show will definitely become about interpersonal conflicts. Don't worry about that.
I would watch that show, though. Not a lot, but...
A show about Jonah living in the whale?
Yeah, and he's like a whale biologist. Well,
is that going to be the prequel to that one episode of Futurama with the whale biologist who hates whales?
Yeah, this is the backstory of that whale biologist. He had to live inside of a whale for a few years when he was in graduate school. That's how you graduate from whale school.
Back on our Leviathan, John is complaining to Zan, as we previewed in our cold open, that nobody takes him seriously because he doesn't know how to open doors.
He's like, everyone treats me like a beagle, but not a cute beagle. A beagle that was foisted upon them.
Well, Zan gives him some advice. She tells him, look, Dargo and Aaron are warriors, so you just need to, like, prove yourself to them as a warrior. Just be useful, and they'll stop treating you like you're useless.
Okay, she does kind of give that context, which I do like, because, as I pointed out, he's already saved their asses several times at this point, but none of it has been warrior-based. It's all been
science-based, which they actually don't have respect for.
Or bard-based.
Which, again, no respect.
Yeah, he saves them using social skills and, other skills.
Although, just a little preview of the end of this episode, John saves the day at this end of this episode by, like, scoring a critical hit on a bluff check, which is such a bard move.
We just watched the episode of Gravity Falls. We have Disney Plus, so naturally the first thing we did was start watching Gravity Falls.
Even though I already own it.
Well, that's the version we watch if we want to see Grunkle Stan's proper hat.
What is even happening? Okay, go ahead.
But there's the episode where Mabel gets a little taller than Dipper, and he gets really jealous, and she has to explain that this is important to her because he's better than her at all of these different things. And it doesn't come up in the episode, even though it is an important point, that she's better than him socially. Like, he might be better at school, he may be, I don't want to say smarter than her, but better at, like, applied science stuff than her.
Yeah, like, he's beat her every time they've played chess, but she has friends.
Yeah, and it does sort of tie into this thing with social skills being...
devalued?
Yeah, I was going to say, an undervalued thing, which... I feel like sexism is there somewhere, but I'm not sure where.
I mean, it's true that fighting is a skill that's definitely coded male, and emotions is a thing that's definitely coded female, so it makes sense that we would value one and not the other. But what's great about this show is Dargo and Aaron, both warriors, gender never comes up. John is the emotional one. John and Zan,
yeah.
But John isn't treated like it's somehow feminizing for him to have emotions. Do you know what? John might be, I don't want to say this because I'm sure I'm forgetting some terrible things that are going to happen, but John might be an example of non-toxic masculinity.
Huh. Yeah, one of the things that I don't love about Gravity Falls, but I do think is an important part of it, is Dipper's relationship with masculinity.
Uh-huh. Especially, I mean, we see that with the way he treats Wendy.
Yeah.
But the show is about him growing out of that.
Yeah, and there's a really good episode later where they kind of confront that a lot of the cues he's been taking are from Grunkle Stan, whether he wants to or not, and how that's not a positive thing. Like, how masculinity needs to evolve over time, because a lot of the ideas that, let's be frank, didn't actually work for our grandparents don't work for us.
Right.
Because people are like, oh, it was a different time back then.
Yeah, a time when you couldn't get divorced.
Yeah, it wasn't really a different time back then.
And women couldn't have credit cards. So they had to deal. Okay, so in addition to talking about how John's a bard, let's keep an eye out for if he actually is a good example of non-toxic masculinity. Because I think he might be, even though I'm sure people are going to tweet or private message me about terrible things he's done that I'm forgetting.
Yeah. We already had a little non-consensual kissing last episode.
It wasn't the best.
He's not Kirk.
Oh my god, no! He's not even Riker. So, John goes off to check the vents in the living quarters, and he does a little striptease for us as he does.
Yeah, Zan's like, you just have to prove yourself, and he's like, alright, da-na-na-na, da-na-na-na.
Seriously, he takes off his jacket in a very, sexy way.
He literally turns around to face Zan as he pulls off his jacket
lets
slowly.
It slide off his body.
But yes, no, he's very showy while removing his clothing. It is like a strippery version of that one scene from the Anastasia movie.
Honestly, this episode, starting now, because remember, the whole plot right now is that it's getting hot in here.
So take off all your clothes.
Yeah, but also, everyone is hot and sweaty, and it's just I'm just sure this episode awakened something in several people. That's all I'm saying.
Mm.
So John goes to his living quarters and sees a bug?
Yes, and sees a bug, and he immediately turns around, squats down, and then jumps onto a table.
Okay, so yeah, he jumps up onto the ledge of the window. I guess it's a window.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the camera does highlight his ass as he does so. I did not notice this till you pointed it out. There's a lot of John ass in this episode.
Yes. Well, it's because he's been wearing that bulky spacesuit up until now, and now you see, hey, Ben Browder is a real fit dude.
Yeah, he is. Anyway, he jumps up on the ledge, and okay, so how would you describe this bug?
Tube shaped. It's like one of those weird hard worm beetle things. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Okay.
It's kind of larva-y.
It looks to me like somebody took a giant cockroach mold and put it on top of a DRD.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can definitely... Especially the way they move.
Yeah. It's funny because it'll switch back and forth. Later it will sprout legs and move around, and then it looks nothing like it looks when it's scooting across the room. When it's scooting across the room, it's like clearly on top of one of the DRD robots.
Yeah.
And it's got like eye stalks, and it's got these like hand stalks that have all of these like threads that can grasp things. And like one stalk that has this kind of almost white dart that comes out of it. It's... They're creepy. I would do what John does, which is freak out, call for help, and then kill one.
I mean, honestly, John handles this situation pretty well, all things considered. Like, he's up on the table, and he's like trying to or ledge, and he's kind of crawling around, and there's another one in the vent that sort of pops out at him.
Yeah, it's like right where his hand is. So he like parkours over to another ledge.
And he radios for help, and Dargo's like, why don't you catch one so we can see what they are, you giant wiener boy?
And Aaron's like, don't let them back in the vents. And he says to them, between you and me, guys, you can go wherever you want. But then he does grab one, toss it into a pillowcase, and just beat it to death.
Yeah, one of them sprouts legs, and it's kind of coming at him. So he grabs a pillowcase and he wraps it up, and then he's just wanging it against the walls and the floor.
Yeah, which is weird because this is the moment where this becomes the plot of Ender's Game, by the way.
Yes, this episode is the plot of Ender's Game. So I love how he bangs it against the wall and the floor and the wall and the floor, and he's like, I'm done. And then it starts wiggling, and he's like, wall, floor, wall, floor, wall, floor again.
Well, it's like a horror movie, right? It seems like it's dead, and then it has that one moment where it hops back to life, and then he, like, beats it down again. And he, like, picks up the pillowcase he's wrapped it in, and the pillowcase is, like, dripping with fluid. It's super gross.
He picks it up in a way so Ben Browder's bicep enters the... Like, this episode is really big on sexualizing Ben Browder.
It is definitely objectifying his body. That is not a lie.
Yeah, I'm not used to shows doing this with male characters. It's odd.
Refreshing?
Yeah. It's not unwelcome. It's just not
he is
something
a
I...
handsome man.
He is a handsome man who definitely works out. And then there's Rigel.
Well, he's a puppet.
Oh, that's not an excuse. Puppets can work out. I remember the weird alien that built itself out of other aliens later on. That was a puppet, and that was ripped.
You're right. That puppet is ripped.
Or the Borg Queen.
The Borg Queen's definitely not a puppet.
Is
the Borg Queen is a woman in makeup,
but,
who is also ripped.
Well, I mean, in the context of the show, she's just made out of corpses and robot bits. So, like, in universe, she's a puppet who made herself out of the best bits she could find for seducing humanity. The Borg Queen is stupid. I'm sorry.
You're thinking of the Borg Queen's monster.
Oh, God.
So, in Zan's lab, she's cutting into the bug to figure out what is up with the bug. And I really like this. She's kind of singing a chant, a prayer to the bug to honor it.
Oh, Mickey, you're so fine, you blow my mind. Hey, Mickey. Hey, Mickey.
Something like that.
I don't understand what she thinks she's going to get out of this. I mean, wouldn't you just... I mean, it turns out that, yeah, there's stuff going on with the bugs, but if there were cockroaches in the ship, would she be dissecting the cockroaches to see what's up with them?
Well, I think so, because as much as Zan is honoring the life of this creature that she's inspecting, and as much as she is a non-violent priest character, her her goal here is to figure out what chemical they can flush through the ship that will kill all the bugs and not them.
Ah, smart.
I mean, she doesn't say it out loud, especially because everything that's going to happen happens, but that's the reason to be examining the bug, right?
So John's pretty freaked out by his little encounter, understandably.
But he's more freaked out to learn that the bug has his DNA.
Ugh. Nasty.
Yes.
And Aaron's like, hey, John, shut up and stop whining. Go get us another bug because you kind of messed this one up too much.
Yeah, go get one that's alive. Meanwhile, they're at a junction in the ship that has been completely covered over with blue goo. And Dargo is trying to cut through it with like a space laser. And nothing. It's not budging at all.
Hey, Dargo, why don't you try that stupid-looking plastic sword of yours?
But proving your point, Dargo gets tired of trying to cut through the blue stuff and just tries to cut through the bulkhead next to the blue stuff. And Pilot gets pissed off because he's cutting into Moya, a living being.
Seriously.
We just had an episode about that.
We've had 2 episodes in a row about why that's a bad idea.
And one of the DRDs goes and, like, shocks Dargo.
Good. I like the DRDs more than I like Dargo.
Dargo has let John know, though, that the reason Aaron is being such a bitch to everyone right now is that Sebaceans don't have whatever gland it takes to regulate heat.
They're like pigs.
Okay, I mean, they do sweat, though.
Okay, so they're not like pigs.
This is a very sweaty episode.
This is an incredibly sweaty episode. If you want to see Claudia Black nearly naked and covered in sweat, this is an episode for you. This episode is a little bit of something for everyone.
Yeah, I guess it does.
No matter who you want to see sweaty and naked. Well, not sweaty and naked, but...
sweaty and...
sexualized.
Yes. So, apparently Sebaceans do not do well in the heat, and...
this is apparently going to be really important later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, heat delirium is always going to be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And John goes to talk to Aaron, and she fills him in on the details of heat delirium. Basically, Sebaceans, if it gets too hot for them, first they lose their motor control, then they lose their short-term memory, then they lose their long-term memory, but it doesn't kill them. They just walk around not knowing who they are or what they're doing or able to hold anything, and they call it the living death.
So, this is going to be my running thing throughout this episode. She has a little ship she can just get in. Why didn't she do that?
Well, I mean, it's true she could get in her prowler and fly away.
Yeah. Or just, like, fly behind them for a little bit.
Until they get it worked out. Yeah, I guess that makes more sense. I was going to say, I don't know how long... the prowler is designed to fly out of a command carrier, shoot people, and then fly immediately back to the command carrier. So I don't know how long it can go on its own.
Yeah. But, I mean, if this is an imminent threat...
yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point.
And they have a few other ships, don't they?
Moya has her own shuttles, it's true.
So this is basically only an issue because no one thought of...
it's a bottle episode. No
Yeah.
one can leave. Aaron tells John that the living death of heat delirium is the only time peacekeepers kill their own for mercy.
Oh, okay, because I was about to say that can't possibly be
There
true.
is a long pause there, though, before she adds for mercy. I don't think that was in the script, though. I feel like that was Claudia Black.
So, meanwhile, we go through the bowels of Moya to see that a whole bunch of stuff is just splorching out.
Yeah, the lights are blinking, Moya's flying around, and John comes across Zan turning the heat up instead of down on one of those vent things that she showed him earlier.
I do like how John's muttering to himself about how he's like, it had my DNA. Why doesn't anyone get that it's a big deal that it had my DNA? It feels like it feels like a big deal that it had my DNA. You know, I really like John.
I'm glad you like John. John tries to stop Zan from turning the heat up, which is the opposite of what they're trying to do. And she just, like, clocks him, knocks him to the ground, turns the heat all the way up, and then vomits blue goo onto the control so that it can't be turned to cool.
So John runs up to Aaron and he's like, hey, so I think Zan's like possessed or something because she attacked me and she turned up the heat and she vomited blue goo and I don't know her that well. Maybe that's normal, but it seems kind of weird.
But Erin doesn't respond to him. Instead, she just keeps typing at one of the consoles in command. And Pilot tells John that she is turning up the heat. He feels her forehead and says she's not sweating, so she must have heat stroke. And it's like, John, you just learned that she has a fundamentally different physiology than you. That doesn't necessarily mean heat stroke, but okay, whatever. He tries to stop her from initiating the command that's gonna, like, blast all of the heat, but she ignores him. She headbutts him, knocks him to the ground, and he, like, tackles her. And while she's trying to fight him off, he ends up accidentally pulling her arm off.
Whoops. I'm sorry, there are so many shots of Ben Browder's ass during this fight.
This fight sequence is Ben Browder's ass heavy. There is no doubt about it. It's...
The camera keeps on revolving, so it's in the main shot. It's really bizarre. I mean, good for them being equal opportunities, but, like...
Yeah. I mean, you could say that it's not sexual. I mean, it's definitely sexual. But you could say that it's a juxtaposition between, like, Ben Browder's sexy ass and the body horror of the fact that he just ripped off Erin's arm.
And Erin walks up and she's like, huh. She sees a version of herself on the floor and Ben Browder holding her arm, and she's like, huh, this is new.
Yeah. We go to commercial then, and when we come back, we're in Zan's lab again, and Zan is examining the fake Erin and saying, it's exactly like Erin. Everything about it is identical. It has Erin's DNA. And then John, who apparently hasn't brought this up before, is like, oh, when you attacked me in the corridor... And Zan's like, I didn't attack you in the corridor. He's like, right, it must have been a clone of you.
Keep in mind, it's important. The exterior is exactly like Erin, but the interior is all blue goo.
Yes, that is accurate.
So, Erin asks if either one of the clones said anything before they attacked John, and John's like, no, they didn't. I guess they can't speak.
Good. That's a good thing to know. Interesting that we had... last week on our Charmed podcast, an episode about shapeshifters, and now we have, like, crew cloning bugs in this episode.
Yeah.
It's a nice... It lined up nicely.
It did. Especially because we're doing them in the order they're supposed to be done in, because if we were doing them in the air order, we would have had some other episode.
It's true. So, the horror now, obviously, is that there is an army of bugs that look... like the crew, and you're not going to know who's a bug and who's a crew until it starts to kill you.
The easy solution would just to be...
talking all the time?
Yeah, exactly.
Dargo suggests that they all cut off their pinky finger.
Oh, okay, so...
Hopefully you don't run into more than 10 clone races in your adventures.
Well, yeah. My thought was more, okay, why wouldn't they just clone you without your finger then? Because they have Erin's haircut.
Yeah, they absolutely would just clone you without your finger.
And John's like, no, that's stupid. Look. And he picks up a marker and he makes a red mark on his hand, which is also dumb. Just talking.
Yeah. But that's not the point that we're at in the episode. We're at the point in the episode where everybody puts a red mark on their hand. Weirdly, John puts it on the back of everyone's hand, but because Dargo's costume includes gauntlets, he has to put it on Dargo's palm. I feel like that was a last-second adjustment because they realized they couldn't put it on his hand.
Zan's like, look, we can't turn down the heat because there's blue sludge over all of the thermostats in the ship, and since apparently Erin can't just get on her own damn ship for 10 seconds, we have to deal with this now. And Ben Browder's like, okay, so we need to find something to dissolve the blue sludge, which,
So, now they all have missions. Zan's gonna figure out how to dissolve the blue stuff. Rigel's gonna be thrown into the ship's innards to go find the bugs and commune with them. And Erin is going to go down to Pilot because that's where she feels naturally drawn. So, the next scene is one of my favorites in the episode.
Well, it's a really good Erin and Pilot scene.
Yeah, Erin is having an existential crisis with Pilot because she's starting to lose her motor functions. And if she can't hold a weapon, what is she even? And Pilot, like, reaches out an arm and comforts her. And then he talks about how it's so strange because he's been so afraid of peacekeepers and he's not afraid of her.
She gets offended by it and he's like, no, it's a good thing. It's a compliment.
Yeah. he suggests that they shut down the ship and open up all of the cargo bay doors and just vent everything into space and, like, let some cool air in. Open a window.
Yeah, open a space window.
Aaron says they can't do that because then they would be super vulnerable, sitting ducks for anything that came by them.
Hey, remember that thing that was introduced earlier in the episode that hasn't been mentioned in like 20 minutes?
Oh, yeah, interesting. But they do it anyway. They turn off all of the ships and they open the cargo bay doors. So just so you know, Moya is sitting defenseless in space right now.
So we get a quick shot of Rigel struggling through Moya's guts.
It's so weird because he's like inside the wall looking for the bugs, and John and Dargo are like walking along the hallway, like banging on the wall, like that's doing anything other than annoying Rigel. Like, what are y'all doing?
He's essentially in the crawl space of the ship.
Yeah, basically. Dargo talks a little bit about Sebastian heat delirium and how he, you know, hates peacekeepers and he wished they would all die of heat delirium. John gets all offended because he hasn't been living under a fascist regime, so he's all like, but the one peacekeeper I know is nice to me. How can you hate peacekeepers? Even though she's not nice to him at all, even a little bit. I do like Dargo's next comment, though, which is, if it means anything to you, the part of me that wants Aaron to live is slightly bigger than the part of me that wants all peacekeepers to die.
Progress?
John says that's not much, and Dargo says, well, it's what I've got. Back at Pilot Station, it's gotten just a couple of degrees colder, and Aaron is kind of crouched down underneath Pilot's console, and she's also worried not only that she doesn't know who she is and she's going to succumb to the living death, but also that no one on the ship cares to save her because why would they? Because she's a peacekeeper, and peacekeepers have been oppressing all of their races forever.
Also, she's not been the nicest person.
Yeah, that too. In the guts of the ship, Rigel comes across the alien, well, what he discovers is the alien's nest. She has built a giant nest, and she is just spitting out eggs like that one American Godzilla movie that was so terrible.
Yes.
I think this is actually really cool because we see the, like, membrane of the hive, and you only see the queen, like, a little bit behind it. It's very eerie and scary.
It's very well shot. I mean, the show is shot like a horror movie, which works to its benefit most of the time.
Yeah, the shots of the queen are super effective for how little we see of her. And I guess Brian Henson knows how to shoot puppets.
Well, it's also... Farscape is a really claustrophobic show. I mean, a lot of sci-fi, I say as though I'm an expert, but a lot of the sci-fi I've seen plays with the fact that space is big and open. You get the idea of the large, vast openness of space. And this show is mostly, it's big out there, but inside, it's claustrophobic. It's a submarine.
Yeah. In actuality, space is tiny because it's only as big as whatever ship you can build around yourself. Yeah. Zen, meanwhile, has found a substance that will dissolve the blue goo, so there's that. But before she can tell anyone or do anything with it, she is shot in the neck with one of those white darts that the bugs shoot out.
Yeah, it feels like she should be dead. That's a nightmare, like, right in the throat.
Yeah, it's horrifying. Dargo runs up to see if Zan's okay. Aaron is next to Pilot, unconscious. John's trying to figure out what's going on with Rigel because he found the hive of aliens and he's stopped responding.
It's probably not good, John.
This is a good racking up the tension third act, but we're going to interrupt it for a sexy John on John fight.
Yes, it is John v. John.
Yeah, one of the alien bugs who looks like John comes up to John. It immediately sees the paint on his hand and then, like, almost to taunt him, raises its hand and duplicates the paint.
See, the paint was stupid. It's just, I mean, your clothes aren't part of your DNA and it mimics the clothes.
Right?
So, like, talking. And John's like, this is weird. Can you understand me? Should we kiss?
Yeah, but they don't kiss, they start punching instead. And now you get 2 John asses for the price of 1.
Okay, the fight literally starts with Alien John turning John around, bending him over, and then punching his back. It's weird.
He's punching him in the kidneys, but yeah, it's pretty. I just, I this definitely awakened something in someone. That's what happened.
I don't. I mean, I know I'm beating this horse into paste at this point, but I guess it says something about how rarely men are sexualized to this degree that it keeps on hitting me as how weird it is that this is the focal point of the episode.
It's true. If it was Claudia Black, it would probably be not as noticeable.
I mean, we had that a couple episodes ago with Charmed, where the intro shot was Shannon Doherty's crotch.
Right? And I mean, we've all read comics, so oh.
Yeah, it's like if Frank Miller was into dudes.
You're right. That's what the scene framing in this show is, in this particular episode is.
Yeah, I remembered more of Claudia Black's ass in the in this episode, but we really haven't got any of it.
No, we don't get too much of Claudia Black's ass. Dargo comes up into command. He's carrying Erin up into command, which I don't know why he didn't just leave her down there.
Yeah, I can't imagine it would be cooler here.
I don't know. He carries Erin up into command, and then John gets this awesome action hero horror movie moment where he strides into command carrying his own head. He tells Dargo that, yeah, the bug dudes can mimic everything they see, so there's no way to know that they're you except that they don't talk, so just try to talk to them.
Yeah, the obvious thing.
John sits down to talk to Erin, and she has gone into the delirium. She thinks that she's in the middle of commando training.
They check in with Rigel, and Rigel's like, yeah, there's a fuck ton of bugs everywhere. If I move, they're going to tear me to shreds with their pointy bits.
And Tarka's like, okay, don't move.
And I do like Rigel. Rigel's like, thanks, ace advice.
Oh.
And he's like, look, I can't do anything. I need to just... I can't do anything.
He does let them know that the bug queen is, like, laying replicants so fast that everybody is screwed, essentially. And then Zan comes up to command. She's got the dart in her throat, and then she starts talking in a weird alien voice.
She is... I am the speaker of the dead, or for the dead. I didn't read the Ender's Game books.
That's a completely different thing. Fun fact, though, she says she's the monarch of the Drac. The original script had apparently had the queen of the Drac be called the Sultana. Mm-hmm. But in Australia, Sultana is a breed of raisin. So they changed it to monarch.
That's disappointing. Well, I guess they didn't want to get sued by a raisin company.
No, I think they just didn't want it to be confusing to the Australian audience. Weird captioning thing. Mm-hmm. When Zan starts talking as the monarch, it's captioned as male voice.
I didn't think it was.
It's Virginia Hayes' voice. It's run through like a synthesizer, but it's Virginia Hay who's talking.
Yeah.
And the voice is the monarch, who is a female. So,
where the hell did that come from?
Drop your assumptions, caption guy. So, according to Zan, who is speaking as the monarch, it is her genesis. This is the time when she is reproducing.
Yeah, her species flies through space until it hits something hot, and then it cranks up the heat on that thing until all of her larvae turn into space bugs, and then they fly into space.
Okay, but she doesn't give them all of this information. John goes full-on bardic gather information skill. He's like, Genesis, is that your birth? You live in space, but you need heat to give birth. That's why you flew into our ship. And it's like, wow, John.
It's a real Batman 66 moment. Like, he has basically no evidence, but gets everything right off the bat.
I'm telling you, John is rolling all 20s this week. He was like, ooh, I use my gather information skill. And the DM's like, all right, but you're going to have to roll a natural 20 to get anything out of her. And it's like,
bam!
Read it and weep. So John is like, okay, well, great. So this is your birth cycle. how long does it last? And the monarch's all like, we don't understand the human notion of time.
Ugh, barf.
But they're halfway through, so...
This must be the emotion you humans know as blood.
Yeah. So John finds out they're halfway through her cycle, and he also realizes that, and this is the Ender's Game part, she didn't actually start attacking them until he killed the first bug. So maybe humans are the aggressors.
Nah.
I mean, they invaded the space.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the deal with bugs, right?
Yeah, they came into his house and they started killing his friends by cranking up the heat. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you don't really get the moral high ground, Monarch.
He does manage to use reason with her and be like, hey, you know, if you keep cranking up the heat, the ship will die because it's a living thing.
Yes, if you do this, then all of your children will die.
Yeah, but John does manage to convince the monarch to turn down the heat. She confines them all to Zan's lab, except for Rigel, who is still stuck in the bowels of the ship surrounded by bugs.
And he's like, are we done? I have to go to the bathroom. And John's like, hold it. There's a thing going on.
Yeah. So they're all going to stay in Zan's lab until Genesis is over, and the monarch has turned the heat down a little bit so that Aaron doesn't die. And also Aaron has stripped down to a tank top and tight shorts.
Yes, we are starting to, I'm not going to say counterbalance John's sexiness this episode, but we're starting to broaden the general sexy appeal of this episode.
Aaron's behavior towards John at the beginning of this episode has not indicated any warmth or attraction to him, but they are both so attractive in this episode. You're like, look at the two pretty people. Surely they will get together in 3 years. Spoiler, it takes a while for John and Aaron to get together.
Not to be Johnny quotes a lot, but that one thing from Great News. Love is beautiful when both people are hot.
I was thinking more of Grey's Anatomy. It's a scene from one of the later seasons when the show has kind of started to spoof itself, where one of the interns sees two other interns making eyes at each other and is like, oh, they're both so attractive. I wonder what's going to happen.
It's a really good general purpose quote.
Yeah. Honestly, I shouldn't be talking about how hot everything is because this is a very serious scene where Aaron asks John to kill her if the living death takes hold.
Yeah. It is a little uncomfortable because it does feel a little bit like it ties into that women have to be sexy even when they're dying thing. But the thing that she's dying from is being too hot, which is, I think, probably the sexiest way to die.
Well, it's like when women in movies are dying of tuberculosis. It's like, look how skinny and pale she is with, like, all these red lips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, I think with tuberculosis, there's probably a lot of, like, puking and stuff in real life that they cut out
Right,
of.
it's not just a gentle cough.
Yeah, it's not just, oh, look how pretty I am in repose. And I'm sure heat stroke has similar things where it's not actually, your skin is glistening with the dew of,
Okay, I've actually had heat stroke. It's not sexy at all.
Yeah. So, what I'm getting at is, this is sexy because they are portraying heat stroke incorrectly.
It's alien heat stroke.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe just Sebastian's dial sexy, like.
Although I will say, like, spoiler for what's coming up, those Sebastians do not look sexy when they're dying.
Yes. Just Aaron.
Yes. She throws John's words back at him and tells him that a friend would do this. A friend would kill her before the heat delirium sets in, and family would do it quickly.
Yeah, because John's like, I'm not going to kill you. And she's like, I thought you said we were friends.
Yeah. I mean, good for her.
Yeah.
We cut to the cargo bay where the Marauder has apparently found our ship, and the commandos are emerging.
I feel like if this show got to choose how long it wanted to be, this subplot would not be in this episode.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Because it's sort of unnecessary and extra to the main plot.
It is extra and unnecessary to the main plot, but I'm actually going to say it does feel necessary to me because we need the reminder that Crace is out there.
Yeah, because he hasn't appeared in 2 episodes.
Yes. Okay, so these commandos are just Okay, this isn't a thing that we ever see again. But for whatever reason, this squad of commandos has decided to bond by getting ridiculous eyebrow tattoos together.
It's cute.
We never see that again. It's weird.
Do we see other commandos?
Yes, but we never see the weird tattoos again. So that's just something this crew has decided to do together.
It's their thing.
It's their thing.
So they see the dead bug Aaron and they're like, oh, well, guess Soon's out the window.
Yep, and then they see one of the bug Dargos and they shoot it and they're like, damn, we are good. Look how fast we killed that Luxon.
Oh, yeah, it's not like he's been taken out like a chump in literally every episode.
It's true. Goddamn. Dargo. Get your shit together, Dargo. So, I know I mentioned earlier that gender is so much less of a thing on this show, and theoretically, gender is not an issue with peacekeepers, with Sebastians. It's not one of the things that is a prejudice in their society.
You don't get any of those stupid, oh, you fight like a girl things?
No. But this group of commandos consists of 4 men and 1 woman. And
it's a real original X-Men thing going on there.
Yeah, and it's worse than that. Do you know the story of the 12 Dancing Princesses?
I think you've told me about this before.
It's my favorite fairy tale.
It's the one with that secret lake and, right?
Yeah, the princesses at night sneak out of their room and go to hell. They cross a lake to get to hell.
Yeah, that's like under their...
Yeah. But there's an invisible soldier following them who's trying to find out what it is they do every night. Mm-hmm. And the youngest princess knows that he's following them. She's like, I hear something behind us. And all of the other girls are like, oh, youngest princess, you don't know anything. And then, like, he breaks a branch off behind them. And she's like, okay, I totally just heard a branch. And they're like, oh, youngest princess. That is totally the role of the woman on this group. She's like, okay, stuff is weird. And the commander's like, oh, only female on the team. Ugh. It's kind of hard to watch.
Yeah, these elite commandos seem like they're not very good at their jobs. They run in and they're like, boy, it's really hot. We probably don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, they take off like a lot of their protective gear because it's so hot, but they just keep moving towards command. And it immediately starts to get a lot hotter because the Monarch just knows that 5 other Sebastians have come on the ship and started shooting her kids, so as far as she's concerned, the deal is broken.
Yeah, she doesn't know that these Sebastians aren't, in cahoots with our main cast.
Yeah.
Cahoots.
It's a good word.
It is a good word.
Down with the commandos, the woman turns the corner and sees another Dargo and is like, another Luxon! And the commander, who hasn't turned the corner yet, is like, there was only 1 Luxon on this ship. Calm down.
Yeah, because they couldn't have picked up another Luxon at some point. Jesus fucking Christ, dude.
Right? Like, what is going on? And then when he comes around the corner and they shoot the Luxon with the bug that looks like Dargo, he's not like, oh, I guess there is another Luxon. He's just like, nothing. He just turns to shoot the clone Zan instead. Like, I don't know. I just feel like this poor woman is... She obviously knows something is wrong and no one is taking her seriously. I mean, I guess she's a space fascist, so it's good that no one's taking her seriously, but still.
So John's like, Monarch, why are you turning up the heat? What's going on here, Monarch? And Aaron's like, kill me. And he's like, no, shut up. I'm going to handle this. Shut up.
She actually says to him, and will say several times to him, remember your promise. He never... He didn't promise.
Yeah, he very conspicuously avoided saying, okay, fine, I'll kill you.
I mean, maybe that happened off screen, but I'm pretty sure this is your short-term memory playing tricks on you, Aaron.
I think he might have said, like, we'll deal with it when the time comes, which I suppose is vague.
I guess.
But meanwhile, the commandos are not doing so hot. Or rather, they're doing very, very hot.
Oh, yes. They find one of the thermostats that's been gooed over, and they assume that the crew did this because the crew is fighting them with heat delirium, which would be a really good way to fight them.
Yeah, why doesn't everyone do this?
Well, I mean, Sebastians can't handle heat well, but it's still heat.
Yeah, but I mean, like, as soon as a Sebastian comes on your ship, just crank up the heat. Like, you wouldn't want your sprinkler system going off all the time, but if you were being attacked by wicked witches, then you'd want,
Yeah, I mean, it's a good strategy. Maybe some people do employ it.
Especially Dargo's people, since apparently this isn't a big deal for him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the Luxons are good fighters and bad strategists.
Mm.
Yeah. So, down in the bowels of the ship, Rigel has to talk to the Monarch and explain to her what's going on. He's like, I can't. And Zan's like, what would Rigel the First do? And then he turns off his communicator and is like, I got this. Which is not helpful because they need to know that you've got this before you turn off your communicator.
Seriously, dude. I think this is building up a lot on the relationships that were established last episode.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Last episode had Zan and Rigel, as a team, and so did this episode.
And last episode had a pretty strong Aaron pilot moment, and this also had a strong Aaron pilot moment.
Yeah, it's interesting how they're kind of forming off into cohorts. And I think that this might be part of your issue with Dargo. Mm-hmm. Dargo doesn't have anyone to play off of yet.
Yeah, he's mostly been playing off John, but John's also playing off everyone because he's the main character in this show.
And his deal with John is that he's like the jock and John's the nerd. That's not something anyone watching Farscape wants to watch, right?
Yeah.
Or at least it's not like we're going to cheer for the jock.
He's not even a competent jock.
Yeah.
Jocks are at least good at football or whatever.
So Rigel gets up his nerve and he enters the nest to talk with the Monarch. And I just want to know what you think of this shot.
We don't get a lot more of Rigel walking, do we?
This is the only time Rigel ever walks, and it was the most expensive shot in this episode. And then they realized, oh, that does not work at all. And also, we spent way too much money on it.
It looks terrible. He's like, Abba, da da da.
That's not a puppet Rigel, that's a CGI Rigel. That's the problem.
I would think it would look less terrible.
Well, no, this is 1999 CGI.
Well, I couldn't tell it was CGI, which speaks well to it. I just thought that the puppet was moving like that because that was the range of motion they could get on the puppet.
Well, I think the motions are so jerky because it's bad CGI. But yeah, that's the only time we ever see Rigel walk.
Good. But the Bug Queen moves some of her stuff so that Rigel can very awkwardly moonwalk but going forward.
Moonwalking but forward. That is a perfect description of his movement.
So he can communicate with her and be like, hey, we're not the ones killing you. We're being invaded right now, and if you don't want all of your babies to be killed by peacekeepers, you need to help us out. Yeah, basically. So back in Zan's lab, Zan, reawakens as the Monarch so that she can tell them, Rigel explained everything to me. Rather, I'm sorry, your sovereign explained everything to me. Oh, God. Yeah, Darga's like, he's not my sovereign. I didn't vote for him. And... strange fish handing out. Yeah, exactly. So she's gonna let them fight the commandos, and then we cut to the commandos in the hallway. Main commando guy looks kind of like a dollar store Tom Cruise. Oh, yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah. John steps out, and they shoot him. And then a little bug thing comes to tend to him and they shoot it. Yeah. And then we cut back to Zan's lab so that we can see that the Monarch is in pain when this happens. So, they're a hive mind. Every time you kill one of her bugs, it hurts her. Doesn't seem smart. Well, I mean, it's... I know, she doesn't control it. She doesn't have a choice. So the Monarch says that she's going to lower the temperature and let them out to fight the commandos. And John has an idea. And he says, no, crank the heat up. He looks over to Erin, and she says, yeah, do it, even though she's clearly in pain. And the heat cranks up, and it causes her even more pain. Couldn't they just crank it up in the rooms where the commandos are? I don't think they have that kind of control. Okay. And Zan is Zan again and tells John, go, fight the commandos, I will take care of Erin. And Dargo has this moment with Erin where he, respects that she's willing to take on the heat delirium so that they can have a chance against the commandos. And... Zan is staying back to tend to Erin. Couldn't she, take the heat from her or something? Is that not in her power set? I don't think that's in her power set. She could take some of the pain, right? I mean, that... Yeah, but the pain isn't the issue. I mean, obviously she's in pain, but the pain isn't the issue. The issue is that she's
is that it's affecting her mind.
I feel like being able to take the heat should be something that Zan can do.
She's a plant. So now we see Dargo in the hallway lying in a pool of bug blood, which is such a good plan that I have to assume it was John's. The commandos all go past him because they assume that this is just another dead Luxon, but nope, he's alive. He wakes up and he takes out the trailing guy and steals his gun.
Honestly, all of the commandos are in sexy tank tops now, too.
Yeah, because it's so hot.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. They had to strip down, too. And then we have a quick shot of Zan with Aaron in the shower.
Yeah, she's showering Aaron to keep her alive.
Yeah, she's showering her with cold water, and Aaron's like, make sure John kills me.
Gotta be John, huh?
Well, I think she might think she's talking to John because she keeps just saying, remember your promise. Then we're back on the command deck where 3 of the 4 remaining commandos are just passed out. I mean, they're not passed out, they're still awake, but they are no longer doing anything. Yeah. The commander is still holding his gun, but he doesn't know who to shoot because the room just begins to fill with Johns.
It's basically that scene with Charmed Dad from the Charmed episode we did.
Oh yeah, except instead of 2 of them, there's like 20 of them.
So, why did they shoot John earlier?
I know, I would think that Grace would be upset that they killed John. Whatever,
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
Like, didn't he want to kill John with his own bare ponytail?
Yeah, absolutely he did. So, John, the real John, goes up to the commander and is like, yeah, you can't kill me. I'm a species you've never heard of. You thought you shot me, and here I am, walking around and talking.
Shooting me only makes more of me. Look how many of me there are now.
I do like that he's like, go back to Grace and tell him he shouldn't have picked a fight with a human.
So does Grace think that John has multiplication powers later, or is this just never a thing? I don't think
that doesn't come up, no. But this is essentially where John wins his bluff check.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, get back on the ship and take off and tell Grace to stop fucking hunting me down. And the commando, for a second, gets enough energy to get his knife out and hold his knife to John's throat. And the DM's like, John, what do you want to do? And John's like, I continue to bluff. He's like, go ahead and slit my throat. I'll just make 10 more of me. I'll kill all of you, and then I'll go kill Grace.
And the Tom Cruise looking guy's like, bleh. And then he collapses on top of John, and John kind of just shoves him to the side.
Yep. And then the next shot we see is the Marauder leaving, so I guess it worked.
Gosh, getting out of the ship if you're gonna die. That seems like a good idea, doesn't it?
You know what?
I know, it just needed to happen for for this to have a plot. Aaron needs to be in danger.
Yes.
But this needed to happen for the episode to happen, and I'm sure there would have been like, oh no, there's blue gunk inside the escape shuttles for whatever reason or something.
Yeah. The next thing we see is the DRDs clean up all of the blue gunk.
Yes, and Rigel goes up to John and he's like, I had blue crud up my ass, and John's like, gross.
Also, my ancestor is Rigel the First, the most important Hynerian who has ever existed, and I look just like him.
And John's like, that's neat, buddy.
It's like, oh, it's not so much fun when people make references you don't get, John, is it? So all of the bugs are leaving, and up on the command deck, Zan is going to speak as the Monarch one last time and be like, hey, thank you for your hospitality.
Yes, Genesis is concluded. We are pleased that only a few of my babies were killed.
And then she, like, talks to Rigel as though he's the sovereign, which makes everybody except Rigel upset, but Rigel's super happy about it, and then
Zan is freed. She's like, that's a weird feeling. Hope that doesn't happen to me again.
Well, the nice thing about Delvians is that when weird things happen to them, they kind of take it in stride.
Yeah, I mean,
she's like, that was an experience I've never had before.
Yeah, she doesn't seem upset about being meat puppeted, or I guess plant puppeted.
Yeah, plant puppeted. She was a little upset about it earlier, but now that everything's over and done with, I think she's okay.
She's like, I'm gonna go sleep for a while. Why don't you go have some end of the episode conclusions with everyone else?
Yeah, well, first John has an end of the episode conclusion with her, where she's like, you proved yourself as a man of action, just like we talked about at the beginning of this episode.
Except he didn't. He was still using his bard skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Zan's impressed with him, but I don't think Dargo or Aaron particularly is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, actually, I take that back. We will know that Aaron is in the next scene when John goes to talk to her.
But right now, John's talking about how he needs to get used to thinking about things differently, too. He's like, look, I was judging them for not having patience with me, but I needed to learn to have patience with the weird bug things in my room, otherwise everyone would have died, so I guess we all learned a very important lesson about space racism today.
Something like that.
Spaceism.
Sure. I mean, honestly, I do really like this scene with Zan, but it's really down to Virginia Hayes' acting. She gives John some good counsel and tells him that the answer to all problems is time and patience.
Yeah, it's a nice speech. It's a nice moment for the two of them.
Yes. She also tells him the answer is the other answer to everything is reverence for all living beings, which comes with time and patience. Well, yeah, I know, right? We haven't even gotten into Zan's backstory, but that's okay.
So, and she tells him, look, it's really impressive how quickly you're getting used to everything that's going on. Like, you might feel like you're really behind here, but no, you're adapting better than anyone else on the ship, which is a really good point.
Yeah. The next scene is John up on the terrace with Aaron, which is an awesome shot. They're like in an enclosed area on the nose of Moya, so it's like they're standing in the middle of space. This is the second most expensive shot in the episode, and we never go up on the space terrace again either, which is unfortunate because this looks cool. Although, I think I mentioned earlier that I was going to call out all the stuff that Guardians of the Galaxy stole from Farscape, because Guardians of the Galaxy is really way more of a Farscape movie than
a Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Yeah. And this scene really feels like the scene with Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana at the end of the first movie. But it's so generic that I almost feel bad calling this one out, especially when there's some very more specific scenes coming up.
Yeah.
But I just had to point it out. Aaron tells John basically the same thing he said to Zan about, like, learning to respect lower beings. And then John comedically realizes that she doesn't mean the bugs, she means him.
And he's like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to take the compliment. Thank you. And she's like, so would you kill me? And he's like, not answering that question.
Yeah. And then we literally watch the bugs fly off into the sunset. And John's like, you know what? It's actually really pretty now that we're not in pain anymore.
Yeah, I can appreciate this now that it's not stabbing me and taking my form.
And it is a cool CGI shot.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the episode.
Yep, the episode ends with Ben Browder's ass and not Claudia Black's ass because she's very conspicuously holding her hands in front of it.
That's weird. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it's a shot of them from behind. Huh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Now, I'm sure you're all very sick of hearing me talk about asses, so we should get on to our segments.
So our first segment is a distant part of the universe, which is what's the best world-building thing for you in this episode?
Honestly, the establishment of the whole Sebastian heat thing, I don't know if it came up earlier.
It has not come up earlier, and it will definitely come up again.
Yeah, it felt like it was laying the groundwork for a lot of things, and it did draw attention to the fact that even though she looks like John, she's not. She's an alien. I do like the little biological things.
Oh.
Oh, what about you? What struck you as alien in this episode?
Well, so my favorite world-building thing in this episode is actually the Dentic.
No, yeah.
Because it's so visceral. It only, like I said, comes up in this episode, but it's something every Farscape person will know what a Dentic is if you say it. Mm. It makes sense that such a thing would exist, but is so different from anything that we would conceivably do. So I really like that as a piece of world building. Our second segment is Strange Alien Creatures.
I mean, it had to be the Monarch, right?
Yeah.
We don't get any clear shots of it, but the bits we do really, like, it's very alien. It's, I guess a lot of aliens borrow from insects because if you look at insects, they look alien up close. They don't look like anything in our world, even though they very much are. And it was borrowing very heavily from insects, but it looked like something foreign.
Yeah, and depending on which angle we were looking at and which shot we were looking at, like sometimes it looked like a wasp, sometimes it looked like you could see a lot of arms coming out of it. That was the mine as well. There
was a big sense of horrifying otherness.
Yes, definitely. It was a really well composed shot too. It was really well done scenes, the two scenes we got with her.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing is just looking for a way home, which is what really struck a chord with you this episode.
Well, I'd have to say all of Erin's one-on-one scenes, especially her one with Pilot, but also her ones with John. The fact that this is Erin at basically the weakest we've seen her up to this point, and sort of her wrestling with the fact that her dynamics are changing and that she's not going to be able to go back.
Yeah, we really did need to see Erin vulnerable for her to be incorporated into the group. And yeah, my favorite scene, my looking for a way home scene, was Erin with Pilot as well. Definitely. So,
I think that'll about do it.
Yeah, next week's episode is going to be Thrown for a Loss.
Is it thrown like...
Like what you sit on?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the description is, when a group of Tavleks come aboard for trade negotiations, Rigel takes a vitally important crystal from Moya to make himself appear wealthy. The Tavleks kidnap Rigel to hold for ransom.
I hate those damn Tavleks.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The Tavleks are interesting. That's an interesting race. One of my favorite lines from the whole show is spoken by a Tavlek.
Do they come back after this episode?
They do.
All right.
So make sure to join us next week. Welcome to the Uncharted Territories is partially listener supported. If you want to be one of those supporters, you should head over to our website, www.welcometotelevision.net, and click on our Patreon link. We'd like to thank our current $5 and above patrons, Beryl, Patricia, Sam, Cassidy, Alex, Alicia, Ryan, Mara Cruz, Rosa, Javier, and Benjamin.
If you'd like to support the show in other ways, you could always rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people find the show.
If you want to talk to us about this episode, or any television at all, you should join our Facebook group, Welcome to Television.
We can also be contacted at I Love TV Zines on Twitter or at ilovetelevisionzines@gmail.com.
So until next time, I'm Tina.
And I'm Max.
And this has been Welcome to the Uncharted Territories.